Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Between the Sharks. Today, we are finally getting into diagnosing the health of this Craigslist 283. I bought it for $325 and the guy dropped it off. So that's, expectations should be low. However, he did say it was a running motor. He did say he pulled it out of his own Chevelle. He was doing an LS swap. So he put it on Craigslist for $500. I waited him out. He kept dropping the price. I said, I'll take it. He dropped it off and it's been kind of sitting here ever since. I'm going off of his word. What I expect out of this thing is a well-worn, somewhat tired, but still decent running 283 Chevrolet. But let's find out what we got. Let's dig in. So this is not the first time I've attempted to do a quick health check on this motor, but I have not completed it yet. So I have my compression gauge in cylinder number 1 and I've pulled all the plugs out. If I can find the video where I pulled the plugs out, I'll show it to you. But for the most part, they're all about the same. They just look like used spark plugs. And that's great news. I went down, checked every single one, made sure there was no indication of oil fouling or lean or all the things you do when you read spark plugs. They all came out really consistent, so that's great. Our goals here are to be as minimally invasive as possible. I have not even pulled the valve covers off. So if we do a compression check, I've turned the motor over by hand, but when we do the compression check, if I get pretty similar compression on every cylinder, I'm gonna call this thing a runner. And maybe we'll pull the valve covers just to see how dirty it is in there. But other than that, we'll run it just like it is. Because the compression test will tell us if we've got any rings left. It'll tell us kind of the condition of our valve train, very, very, very generally speaking. What it won't tell us is the condition of our bearings, but now for those of you that follow the channel, I don't always win on these gambles. This is the last Craigslist motor that I tried to diagnose the health on, and well, it had terrible compression. It was not healthy at all. A compression test indicated a ton of problems. A leak down test proved the problems were even more developed than we had even thought. And here it is, still waiting for me to get around to it. So I'm hoping I get luckier on this 283, because once we've checked the health on that one, I have yet another 283 that we need to check the health on. Fingers crossed, the 283s I want to run just like they are, but let's dive in. So absolutely first things first, right? I checked the oil. It has oil. It's a pretty thick oil. There is no gas in said oil and there is no coolant in said oil. If the oil was really thin, it would suggest that maybe it's got gasoline in it, which you can smell and taste. If it looks kind of like a milkshake or a latte, it's got coolant in it. And if it has no oil in it, well, that's a different concern. But right now, so far so good. We have oil, it has viscosity, it needs to be changed, but it doesn't have any of like the bad news indicators in it yet. Spark plugs are out, they all look okay. No bad news indicators yet. I turned the motor over by hand, it spun freely. That's good too. So now let's get a rig going so that we can power up the starter and spin this motor. All right, basic elements of a compression test. You guys have all seen this a million times, but let's just deal with it. Compression tester into cylinder number 1. You need to have your throttle wide open in order to test compression, because you need the air to go in there in order for the cylinder to compress. So we have no carburetor on it. I removed the pickup plate from my hoist, and then finally I've got a starter, and what I've done is pulled a battery out of a car, ran a negative grounding cable to this exhaust manifold bolt. I have the starter wired to a battery cable that I will connect, come here little guy, here to the battery. And then what would go to the ignition switch, I have wired in here on the back of the starter just to an alligator clip, and I can just engage the starter. The reason it's not spinning right now is we do not have the main battery cable hooked up. So I'm gonna hook that up, and then we're, you know, gonna let it spin over. I'm gonna step back because these are all spark plug holes that are gonna fire compressed gas at my face. So I'm going to move back just a fuzz, and then we'll give it a whirl. Literally a whirl. Starter battery cable is hooked up. Let's just give it a spin. Take a quick look. Sounds all right. That's at like 115. 110. And this thing has not really been spun over in a long time. So giving those rings a minute to kind of like get some oil in the cylinders and all that stuff, I'll take 110 all day long. Let's mark that and move on because I'm gonna forget. All right, we're into number 3 right now. Got number 1 marked at 110, so we'll do 110 PSI in case anybody's wondering what 110 means. And we'll do 1357 on the driver's side, and then we'll go to cylinders number 2, 4, 6, and 8 over yonder. It doesn't have any lope to it, so that's good. Boy, howdy. 150. All right, let's reset. We're in cylinder number 5. 150. Look at you, little buddy. Next. How do we do? 150. $140. All right. Feeling good about this so far, gang. Please don't let me lose it. Knock on some wood. We'll move over to the us side of the engine. All right, here we go. Cylinder number 2. $150. All right, cylinder number 4. 150, maybe 140, but we're up there, right? 150. Gang. No whammies. All right, cylinder number 8. 150. Because it's so consistent, let's go back to 1 and see if 1's really an outlier at 110. Now, if it is, I'd still run this motor all day long. But what I'd love to see is that it's up 140, 150 like the rest. Now we're pumping oil all over the back of this motor though, out of where the gauge ought to be. All right, let's give it one more. Sure means the oil pump works though. Ready? Come on in for this one. How'd we do? Look at that. 135. All right, I'm pretty happy. This, without any other assessment, in my opinion, is a runner. Like I would, the rest of it, the rest of the ignorance, complete bliss at the moment. Put a carburetor on it, put some exhaust on it, fire it up. Got a little bit of a mess going on, which is a small price to pay to learn what we have just learned. So basically, I'm between 135 and 150 on every cylinder on this motor. To me, that's enough to just run it because it's breathing well, it's compressing well. That tells me that the rings and the valve train are working in tandem well enough to run. I mean, I'm just jazzed. I could pull off the valve covers and see how like gross it is in there, but I don't even care right now. So what are we gonna do next? This is where it gets, you know, complicated. Because I am deeming this one a runner, and I've already put the turbo 375 transmission on the back of it, my guts are to actually pull this motor out and save it for our Mercury project, because I already got the automatic on it and I know it runs. But in order to confirm that's what we want to do, I've got to get this other motor out, and we got to see if we can go 2 for 2. Because if this one's good, then what we'll do is drag this thing out of here, put the 4-speed on it, and then jam it in this spot here. Wow, it feels complicated. What am I doing? Do I even know? I don't know what I'm doing. Can I drag that other motor out, get the starter on it, and do this one more time? All right, gang, we are gonna leave it all on the table, which is probably a huge mistake. And check this second motor. I've got it dragged out now. It's another 283. That one I think is a 65. This one I think is a 66, 67 283. Check the deck numbers. Claims it's a 195 horse Chevelle motor with a power glide. There's, you know, some suspect stuff going on. So what we've got is a lot of chrome, right? And a 2-barrel intake. So this thing is branded with, it says Chevrolet in a lot of places, which is entirely not my style. I think that's reserved for Harley guys, where they need everything that they own to say Harley Davidson, and every part of their motorcycle needs to say that as well. But that said, the confusing part is why would you stick all this chrome stuff on and leave a 2-barrel stock intake with a chrome oil filler? I know you can just buy the dress-up kit. If it was just valve covers and oil filler, I'd get it, but you clearly, someone's pulled the oil pan and the timing cover, and that's just a lot of work to put some, you know, dinky stuff on there. So I like to think that if they saw something that didn't look so good in there, they wouldn't have bothered continuing. But I don't know if that's true or not. So let's grab the spark plugs out and take a look, and then we'll stick the starter in this and do the same thing we did on that motor. All right, we got the wrong tool for the job, but it'll do. I'm gonna go ahead and crack them all loose on this side, and then we can just kind of yank them out one by one. It's clearly been rattle canned since they've been in there. That's a little not great. We're a little fouled. There's number 4. These electrodes are really worn too, which is interesting. Just giving them a sniff, you know, but so far they're consistent. This looks like they need to be replaced. That one's not quite as... All right, here we go. That other side was all carbon fouled, which is, you know, a little bit weird with a 2-barrel carburetor, but could be a lot of things. Not so bad. Not so bad. All right, they're all right. We're a little carbon fouled on the other side, but that's really kind of it. Now, while we're kind of pointed over here, you'll notice that this exhaust manifold actually has a spot for some bolts for a bracket. And this is where your generator or alternator would go, I believe, on these motors, because you'll notice on the heads, there are no accessory holes on these 283 Power Pack heads. Now, Power Pack heads, you know, people think they're all fancy and all that stuff, but they're really small valve, small compression chamber, compression increasing heads for these tiny little motors. Now, I think all passenger cars after like 64 always had Power Pack heads. The trucks may not have. when they got to the style of like the all passenger power pack head, you'll see the rectangle with a little triangle on top. You know, sure, they're cool. Same heads on both motors, but don't go writing home about it. They're great on a 283 or probably a 305 maybe, but yeah. Now, I've got no distributor in this one, so I've got to decide I want to jam a distributor in there just to spin the oil pump, which feels like a good idea. If I'm going to turn this thing over, I may as well get it oiled up if I can fit it in with this contraption here. All right, gang, so I've moved the starter over, all the plugs are out. I pulled all the old oil from the Cadillac. I don't know if you watched that video, but basically it was like low mileage Royal Purple with too much gasoline in it because of those problems. But this engine had no oil in it when I got it. So I thought, well, Royal Purple with a little gasoline, which is kind of like a thinning agent, kind of a cleaning solution. I would never run it with that stuff in there, but I figured it's better than no oil for right now. So we're gonna give this a whirl. I've got the throttle open. I've just got a wrench sitting on it right now, but there's no return spring on this at the moment. So throttle's wide open. Basically, we're gonna start with number 1 just because, well, it's easy to keep track of. It feels right for some reason. And we're gonna work our way down all 8 cylinders and hope for the best. Fingers crossed. Here we go. Oh yeah, I threw a distributor in here to spin the oil pump. That's kind of necessary. Spinning over fast. 150. Let's see if this oil pump's working, because it should start actually spraying out of this thing here in a second. Oh yeah, now we're getting oil all over the place. 150. Looking for a pipe plug and not succeeding. Wait, am I? No, too many big. We're in cylinder number 3. Let me see if I can just plug that with my hand. That's smart. There we go. $150. Next. Here we go on 7. Man. We're getting up there to 120, but man, I'm making such a mess. I gotta solve this problem before we do the other side. All right, well, I went through all my stuff. I found a pipe plug that fits, I think. Pretty sure. Checked it with a micrometer. Did not want to cross thread that hole at all. So, gave everything a quick blast of brake clean because I made a big mess. Let's try this one more time. All right, we're at 120 on number 7. We've been at 150 on everything else. I'll take that as a win all the same. That is definitely not low compression, but it's a bit more of a discrepancy than I'd like to see. All right, we're into cylinder number 2. $150. Cylinder number 4. $125. Cylinder number 6. $150. All right, last but not least, no whammies. Cylinder number 8. $140. I feel pretty good about all of that. Let's just assess now. Wander the shop with me, gang. 283. I think I might have only paid 200 for that one. I don't remember. I did a video on it right when I bought it. I'm pretty sure I paid 325 for this one. And then our 350 that's disassembled here, I paid 500 bucks for this, but I also got a 4-speed with it. So, and a bell housing, and a flywheel, and a brand new clutch. So, I did the same check on this one. This one was a dud. Now, that said, the dude who sold me that one said it ran. But when I met him, I could read the room. He had no idea what he was talking about, and I could tell. So I still gambled on it because I knew the sum of the parts was all right. This guy said he took it, like helped his friend take it out of a car for an LS swap, and it was running. Everything about that seems accurate. It seems like a running motor. I don't know what's been done to it, but basically we're between 120 PSI and 150 PSI on all cylinders on that, and clearly has a ton of oil pressure. This one over here also, this guy I actually trusted because he said he took it out of his own car, seemed like a car guy. So this one also checked out between 120 and 150 PSI on all cylinders. It clearly also has oil pressure as it's, you know, pumping all that stuff out. Hopefully he didn't strip this. No, that bolt's barely in there. Okay, good. That's good news. So, let's just, this is, I'm gonna say some stuff. It's gonna make some folks mad. Here, again, is my argument for the small block Chevrolet. Both of these motors are nearing 60 years old. You can get a 283 that's almost 65 years old, and before that a 265. That is in the mid-50s period of, you know, one era of hot rodding heyday. So here we go, gang. We have the last of the first generation small block Chevrolet engines. Went from 265 to 283 and onward and upward from there. But these motors are 65 years old. They are still vintage motors. You still need to have some knowledge to be able to find the parts and pieces and put together a combination that works for you. But I know people dig flatheads and nail heads, and you know, once you get out of the flathead era and into the overhead valve V8 engines, whether it's a Rocket Olds or a Cadillac or a nailhead, this was Chevrolet's version of that starting in 1955. And you can still find vintage speed parts for it, just like we have over there. And just like your flatheads, you can find reproduction speed parts for it. So, I don't know, the treasure hunt can still continue, but my biggest reason for digging on these motors is I paid 300 bucks a piece on average for these engines. They both seem like they're gonna be runners just the way they are, used, right? Junkyard motors, pull-out motors. I'm not gonna rebuild either one of these things. I'm gonna run them just like they are, and they're still 65 years old, and I can still cover them in all the vintage speed parts or repro vintage speed parts that I want. But the nice thing about this is, if I want to drive that car on the highway, these motors will do it. If I want to show off and I blow one of these motors up, 300 bucks, man. Like, and I can probably find another one. And that is my biggest argument against a flathead or a nailhead or a Cadillac overhead valve motor. Don't get me wrong, I get the cool motor thing. The first T I built had a 1956 Thunderbird Y-block in it with the Thunderbird only 3-speed with overdrive. Now, cool engine. Had to like hunt for a tri-power. Found a vintage tri-power intake. Got it all set up. It actually ran really well. But it felt delicate. I drove it to work. I was trying to drive it regularly. And man, just any time something started to think about going wrong, it was sort of a white knuckle ride. I can get a water pump for this anywhere that I need to. I can replace it if I blow it up. I'm not saying those motors aren't cool. I'm just saying, in my experience, the stress and the expense of running a vintage motor on a car you want to drive a lot, it wore me out a little bit. I think these motors are super cool. And the fact that they're still available and still attainable, and we just tested 2 motors for compression in one day, and both came back healthy for cheap. Anyway, you do what you want to do on your own build, but I'm super into this. Thanks for watching Between the Sharks. Good luck on your projects out there. We will see you next time.